It's Radio Free 501c, the voice of Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm your host, Cecilia Sepp. Don't forget to subscribe. We're on all your favorite services. This week I'm joined by returning guest Joost Hasperhoven of the BARIN, and we're talking sustainability. It's all about balance, baby. Welcome to episode 199. Hey everybody, it's Monday, June 12th, and that means it's time for another episode of Radio Free 501c, the voice of Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm your host, Cecilia Sepp. I'm the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips, and I'm also a certified association executive and a certified nonprofit professional. Thanks for joining us this week. And to our global audience, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be. This week, I am welcoming back a guest who should have been back much sooner, Joost Hasperhoven, who is the Secretary General of the Board of Airline Representation in the Netherlands, which is also known as BARIN. We're going to talk about sustainability, specifically in the aviation sector. But before we do that, Joost, welcome back. Would you like to say hello to our audience and tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Cecilia, and thank you for having me on the show again. Hello everyone. My name is Joost Hasperhoven, as mentioned by Cecilia. I have been working for the BAR, the Board of Airline Representatives, since 2017, looking at various different topics. And in this day and age, the last time I was on the show, we spoke about COVID and the return of passengers. That was a big file for me to tackle. And today we're going to talk about sustainability in the aviation sector. And that is an even hotter topic to discuss, and a very important one, because I continue saying we have to decarbonize, because that is our only license to operate in the future.
So that's actually, I am really glad you pointed out the last time you joined us, you were talking about COVID's impact on the airline industry. And that was a very short-term event. When we're talking about sustainability, that's a long-term commitment that we all need to make to take care of our planet. And you are very passionate about that topic. As I was preparing for our episode today, I looked up a definition of sustainability. And this definition says it's society's ability to exist and develop without depleting all natural resources needed to live. Now, I like that definition. I don't necessarily like the part about needed to live, because it makes it sound like you can get rid of everything else. We don't want to do that. We want to be good stewards of our environment. And I also looked at the three major factors within this topic of economy, society, and environment. And I know you have a lot of ideas and comments about those three areas in the airline industry specifically, and that move to decarbonization. So where would you like to start? It's a big topic.
I guess the two things you mentioned, first of all, using all the natural resources. It's not just that, because with using all those natural resources, we emit a lot of greenhouse gases. And I think that's even more worrying than just using our resources, because we can find other resources in due time. And we all know that crude oil at one day will be gone. There's an end to it. But that is with all the natural resources we have. So we have to find energy sources which can be replenished and can be made artificial without emitting greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, NOx, nitrogen, things like that. Because if we continue in the pace we're polluting our planet like we do now, there's no future for the next generations. So it's a two-way thing. It's not using all the natural resources, and by doing that, by using less natural resources, we emit less greenhouse gases. So that is one thing. And the other thing is what you mentioned, the three topics of today, economy, society, and environment, are sort of interlinked. One is attached to the other and attached to the other. We cannot see them separate. So I think it is fair to say that we don't want to give up our way of life just to save the planet,
right.
which we want to do. We want to save the planet, but we will still want to have a pretty life and a nice life and a well-working economy and a decent society. So we have to be smarter than just saying like, okay, drop everything, stop everything, don't consume anymore. You can't just do that. That doesn't work for us. We're humans. We need to eat. We need to work. We need to be able to use trains or planes or cars or buses or whatever. We just can't do everything on a bicycle. Mm-hmm. So we have to be smart in the way we design our future with sustainable energy sources.
I'm so glad you pointed that out, because there's, I think, a lot of extreme viewpoints on many topics today. The environment is one of them. We can't give up life. We can't give up living. But I don't think that switching our fuel sources and living a comfortable, happy life are mutually exclusive either. One of the things I've been thinking about as I was preparing for this conversation is the future of the airline industry. Airplanes use carbon-based fuels now. So we're looking at oil and diesel, and they need that to power the big engines that will move a plane that far and carry that many people. They carry a lot of weight when you think about it. Yeah, so a plane itself is heavy. All the people add weight to the plane, all the luggage, the food, the water, et cetera, that goes along with it. So you need a powerful fuel source. In your work, has anyone suggested how that fuel source could be replaced for airplanes?
Yeah, there's a lot of initiatives going on. It accelerated actually after the conclusion of the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, whereas the aviation industry is working with a base target starting in 2005 already instead of 2015, and that is because in 2005 the international aviation community joined in IATA already started a program called CORSIA, Carbon Offsetting Reduction Scheme International Aviation. So 10 years before the Paris Climate Agreement, because we already saw then we need to act, something needs to happen. And development of new engines or any form of propulsion or new energy sources take an enormous amount of time. It's not just that like, okay, I have a brilliant idea, and well, next year we got free or cheap or endless new sources of energy. So what you see on land, you see that in the United States a lot. I've been to the West Coast in the US many times. You see all these wind farms. You see all those solar panel fields. That is all fine, but that doesn't work for an aircraft. Right. You could think like, okay, we put a lot of solar cells on top of the aircraft, on the wings and on the hull. What if you fly through the night? You don't have the solar power. So those are solutions that don't really work. But there's other initiatives, and some are already being deployed today in small quantities, and some are in the development phases to be tested in the next couple of years, and maybe to be commercially exploited in the years to come, 10, 20, 30 years. Now, one of the things that is currently already being done is the production of sustainable aviation fuels. We call it SAF. And SAFs are not made from crude oil. They're made from a lot of waste sources. That can be cooking oil, that can be a lot of different waste products. And the idea is that SAF is going to replace the current day used kerosene in aircraft. And kerosene is made from crude oil, and kerosene has CO2 emissions. Now, SAF, Sustainable Aircraft Fuels, don't have that. They are easy to be made, although it takes energy to make it as well. So as long as we make that energy coming from sustainable sources like wind power or solar power or whatever, we can make sustainable fuels that don't produce CO2. The only problem now is that there's a huge lack of production. If you look at what is being produced today, we're looking at 1% of the total needed fuel for aviation worldwide. So the targets we have are ambitious. In the Netherlands, we used to have a target which was embraced by the aviation sector to add 14% of sustainable aircraft fuels to all our flights in the year 2030. And that has been brought back to 6%. Because of the fact that the European Commission said, well, we don't have enough production of that, and we can't force every country to do that 14%. So we mandate 6%. So that's the mandate in the Netherlands as well. But I tell you what, it's 2023 now. We're only less than 7 years away from 2030. If we have to beef up the production to 6% from 1% where we are now, we have a long way to go. And it's up to the governments to stimulate that production. Because as airlines, we're just buyers of fuel. We're not producers. So we need stimulation funds. And I think the Biden government in the US is much further on that than what we see in Europe. We're lagging behind, to be honest.
Well, and I have to say, I think living in the United States, there's been a lot of proposals made, and I see that we're lagging as well, because we also have some really ambitious deadlines, like in Europe. So 2025 or 2030. And I don't think that people are giving enough time for us to make these things happen reasonably. Because as you know, you said the airline industry is a purchaser of fuel. So the economy needs to be able to adapt to a new thing. And people need to be able to afford to do that thing and then purchase that thing. And so if it becomes so unreasonably priced, like everybody was so excited about the Tesla electric car, but they're $80,000. Most people can't afford that. And then if you want to replace the battery in an electric car, that can be $30,000 to $40,000 just for the battery. That's not even the car. And another challenge of electric cars, which I'm all for local travel at this point, is finding a charging station. So I worked with a client last year who works in our power grid area, and it's a collection of different companies and people from around the country who make sure we have electricity. And they said that's a challenge that nobody has been able to figure out yet, is how can you charge electric cars on the highway? Where do they pull over? Where do they go to charge their car up? And it can take 4 to 24 hours to charge up a battery on an electric car. So how are we going to accommodate that? I believe in balance with the energy area. I think we can use some fossil fuels for now, because we can use solar power and wind power to charge other things. Like we can create electricity for homes to run things like the air conditioning or the refrigerator and turn on your lights and power your internet. But that's not, as you said, that's not a source for airlines, for airplanes. it's not practical. It's great to dream big and look ahead and say what if, but we also have to have a practical application of these things. And I see a lot of times we're not having those practical conversations. And I see a lot of times, especially in the United States, it's an all or nothing conversation. It's you have to do it this way,
Yeah.
completely green as we define it, or you're
Yeah.
wrong, or we're not going to do it. And it's like, what? No, there can be a balance of things. We can
Uh,
make things
yeah.
happen.
To be honest, I do feel that in the aviation sector, the balance is there. We are on a time path until 2050, so we have another 30 odd years to go,
Oh,
or 27 years to go.
okay.
We have steps where we say, like, okay, in 2030 we want to add 6% or even more, 10% of sustainable aircraft fuels to the entire fuel consumption. That goes up after 2030, and by 2050 our footprint should be zero. So it's not that we have to decarbonize tomorrow. We still have 27 years for that. But it's in the aviation is exactly the same as what you mentioned with the electric cars. It needs time for a society to adapt, to be able to buy those cars, to get a good second-hand market for those cars, to get subsidies on purchasing those, to get enough power stations to recharge your batteries. But the more electric cars there will be, the more power stations there will be, because people see a business. Hey, I'm going to start a power station because people are driving by. The higher the production, the cheaper the car becomes. The more people buying it, the cheaper it becomes. It's the same with aircraft, sustainable aircraft fuels. Currently, SAF is about 7 times more expensive than regular kerosene used in an aircraft, because there's so little of it available. If the production goes up, airlines start buying more, the price will go down, and our airlines are willing to buy even more and more and more. Initially, I think the ticket prices will go up because somebody has to pay for the fuel in the end. And those are the passengers and the cargo handlers. But down the line, you will see that the price of SAF will drop, just like the price of electric cars will drop eventually. But what you need is an accelerator. You need a program where a government actively says, like, okay, we're going to build this factory, and we're going to build another factory, and we're going to build another factory to make those sustainable fuels. And it's just a matter of time. But people have to understand you just can't change things overnight. It takes time to change the technique, the propulsion techniques of airplanes. And that is only one thing. The other thing we haven't talked about is flying on hydrogen or electric flying. There's many more initiatives. There's already smaller aircrafts flying electric now on batteries. The biggest problem with the big aircrafts who fly transatlantic, for instance, by the time you land after a long haul flight, your fuel tanks are empty. So you weigh a lot less than when you departed, and you have to be a lot lighter, because otherwise your landing gear won't hold. But those batteries, they still weigh the same when you depart and when you land. So there's other problems as well to fill up an entire aircraft with batteries, so much that you can't take passengers or cargo anymore. So there's challenges, but we're getting there. So for the smaller distances, say up to 250 kilometers or 150 miles or so, we can absolutely look into electric flying within the next 10 years, I would say.
Yeah, and it sounds to me like that would maybe initially require smaller planes flying more often, maybe taking fewer people. I know I've been on some international flights that hold over 300 people sometimes. The planes seem to be getting smaller, I've noticed, though. When fuel and prices increased, I think, about 10 years ago or so. For some reason, I can't remember now because it was a decade ago, but of course, airline tickets went up. But it also seemed to me that planes got smaller and you had to do more connections. It's very difficult in the United States now to get a direct flight anywhere, unless your destination is one of these places where you connect. So I think we're probably going to be looking at smaller planes that maybe fly more often, or maybe there will be fewer flights initially as we're doing that.
There could be fewer flights. However, the demand for mobility is still there. And as the world population continues to grow,
yes,
the demand for mobility continues to rise. So we can be idealistic about saying, okay, let's start flying less. We just learned that India now has the biggest population worldwide. They surpassed China. If that middle class in India and in China really becomes wealthy, they want to travel, and they are going to travel. So you and I can say, okay, let's take 4 flights this year instead of 5, or 2 flights instead of 3. That helps. But on the bigger picture, on a global scale, we will see an increase of international air travel. You can't stop that. So if you can't stop that, we have to find other ways to reduce the impact aviation has on our planet.
So, and I would like to tie this back to our main audience, which is nonprofit organizations around the world. Nonprofit is growing. And as you know, one of the big ways that nonprofits gain revenue is through in-person meetings. So a lot of membership associations have huge conferences that people have to fly to, and some people fly internationally to come to the conferences. And we're an increasingly global profession, nonprofit management. I recently had a study group and a course where a gentleman from India was participating, and that was our first international study group member. To be honest, and one of the courses he took, he'd be up at 3:00 in the morning, his time. So we're really seeing that in that global impact. So when you look at the airline industry going forward, and I know there's a lot of organizations in Europe that hold regular conferences, do you see your group, BARIN, having an impact on nonprofit meetings at all, or influencing their decisions?
Yeah, I guess so, and right so. I mean, if you can do a hybrid meeting, why not? If you can do an online meeting, why not? You don't always have to travel. It's even advertised by KLM, the Dutch national airline. Think twice before you travel. Do you really have to travel? That's a pretty bold advertisement for an airline whose bread and butter is in transporting people. We have to act responsibly. And that means that if you can do a meeting online, do it. I remember the days that I would travel across the globe for a 3-hour meeting.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's unreal. You won't do that anymore these days.
I don't think anyone should have done that, Joost, but that's just my opinion. For 3 hours.
I was working in the aviation industry, so flying came naturally. So, but still, I mean, a lot of corporates nowadays, corporate customers nowadays say, listen, internal meetings, we don't travel for that anymore. We do it online. If you have to meet a client, which is natural, if you want to close a deal, if you want to negotiate something, you want to sit face to face, and you might not want to do that online in a Zoom or a Teams meeting. Fully understandable. However, think twice if you can do a meeting online, or if you can do the preparatory meeting online, and then say, okay, we've done the basics. Now let's meet face to face. that is already more efficient.
Mhm.
And airlines, I think, are not that worried about about corporates or nonprofit organizations saying like, oh, we don't travel for this reason anymore. We do this one online.
Mhm.
Because, as I just said, the market will continue to grow. So, and the aim of an airline is not getting bigger, bigger, bigger. The aim of an airline is making money.
Right.
And providing jobs. You can also make money as a smaller airline. It's not about being bigger. What airlines do predominantly is responding to a market demand that is there.
Mhm.
People want to travel. People need to travel. I mean, we have a lot of non-profit organizations traveling for humanitarian aid or rescue workers or people going to, but also people going to oil rigs, or those people have to fly. We have a
Right.
lot of people who are ship's crew. They come from the Philippines. Their ship docks in Rotterdam or in Houston, wherever. And these people have been on a ship for about 6 months, and they're about to go home. How do they go home? With a ship again? No, they fly back.
Right.
So there will always be air travel. And I think what people sometimes forget, if our opponents of the aviation industry say that we have to stop flying, then I think, well, the world doesn't stop turning.
Right.
And we need to provide people with an income, not only people working in our industry, but
Mhm.
also people using the airplanes or transporting goods. If I want to buy a new mobile phone, I
Mhm.
know it's made in China. How does it get here? Oh, if you don't want to fly, you can bring it in by a diesel ship. I don't know how much polluting that is, but we need energy, we need transportation. And the economy is depending on a global interconnectivity. You just can't go back to a horse-drawn carriage and saying like, okay, we skipped the entire globalization. Let's go back to a local economy. That doesn't work anymore. It's
No,
not going to happen.
that's an excellent point. It's not. That was considered advanced technology when we were doing it, but we realized there was a better and a different way. And horse and carriage has other challenges. Horses leave a lot of waste in the street behind them. It smells. It can make
Yeah,
disease. It gets on your clothes. We have challenges with anything we do as humans, but in the past we've always been able to find another way. We've always been able to find an alternative and changed our outlook on things. However we travel or interact, and you're absolutely right. Whatever global economy there was, let's say in the age of exploration, it took years to get anywhere. So
yeah,
somebody would
yeah,
take off for the other side of the world and might not come back for 5 years because it
yeah,
took a long time to get there, and then you want to spend time there, and then it takes you a long time to get back.
yeah,
Nobody wants to live that way. We're in a world of speed and instantaneous everything. Now, it doesn't mean airline travel has never been instantaneous, but it can be a lot faster than going on a ship or driving your car.
yeah,
So, for example, I could drive my car from the East Coast to the West Coast, but that would take days. I can fly in 5 hours.
yeah,
It's amazing when you think about how quickly we get places. You can get from the United States to Australia in about 15 hours. You can get from the
yeah,
United States to Japan in about 16 hours because we have
yeah,
airplanes.
yeah,
Now, should you fly everywhere? Necessarily. You have a lot more options in Europe. A lot of people are used to riding the train. One of the great things about the UK is you can take the underground to heavy rail and then take heavy rail to another part of the country. You don't have to fly places. It's a much bigger system. But in the United States, we grew up with cars and horses, and we're used to going long distances using, a
yeah,
Conestoga wagon or a car or something like that. So
You used to
our,
have a nice railway system like the Amtrak, and but it's torn down.
yeah,
There's not much left of it.
no, the airline industry, that's a really good point, Joost, because the airline industry in the United States displaced rail as the
Yeah,
preferred form of travel. It used to be you would take the train, and the trains had different names. Like the
yeah,
trains had a name, like the train from New York to Los Angeles had a name. So you would go, Chicago was a huge hub for rail travel because
yeah,
that's where you would probably change your train on your way across the country. But
yeah.
you're right, Amtrak really doesn't go anywhere
Yeah,
anymore.
no,
You
no. I
know,
think we're better off in that aspect in Europe. We're very much looking at high-speed trains. We
mhm.
have high-speed trains from Amsterdam to Frankfurt to Paris to London to Brussels. So if I have to give a comparison, if I had to take a trip to London to the city center, I have two options. I take a train from my little hometown, which is 20 minutes away from the airport, um, go through security, queue up, do the whole shebang, and that takes me about an hour and a half to get into the plane. Then I fly over to London. That's about 45 minutes. Taxi there for 50 minutes. Deplane, go through customs, etc., and take the underground into the city center. That entire trip cost me about 4 hours, although it's only a 45 minutes flight. But the entire trip takes about four hours. If I take a train, an international high-speed train from Amsterdam to the St. Pancras station in the city center of London, that also takes 4 hours. But I have one journey, and I can sit back and relax for 4 hours, read a book, open my laptop, do a bit of work, whatever. So, and if you compare 800 people in a train or 200 people in a plane, the train is far more efficient in terms of energy use and has a lot less emission per passenger kilometer than an aircraft. So what we're talking about in Europe is that by 2050, we ideally want to have all cities within 750 kilometers connected by train, by high-speed train, instead of flying everywhere. So there is a big program for that. There's subsidies for it. And I think it's a good thing. But I don't want to hear the opponents of our industry saying, "Oh yeah, but the aviation industry is heavily subsidized because they don't pay tax." Correct. International aviation is exempt from tax. And that is because of the Chicago Convention in 1945. The United Nations, after World War II, said, like, in order to improve the relationship between various countries and to bring about more understanding for each other, we want to make international travel as cheap as possible so that people will travel and meet other cultures and get understanding for each other. So it's not just international aviation which is exempt from tax, it's also the international trains or international shipping. It's international travel that is exempt from tax. And that is a clear thing which in 1945 was designed by the United Nations. Now you can argue, okay, that was 1945. We just came out of a global war. Do we still need to have international travel exempt from tax? No, maybe not. But if you want to change it, you have to change it on a global scale, because you have to respect an international commercial level playing field so that everybody abides by the same rules and plays according to the same rules.
And that is fascinating. I did not know that was a convention in 1945. And it made me think that's probably where the travel package of the American plan to Europe came from, because it made it easier for people to get around. And
yeah, could very well be.
I would support maintaining that international travel exemption, because in a world that's continuing to fragment, and continuing to fight with each other, argue about everything. I think we need to have that ability to get out and meet each other and see we have way more in common than we don't as far as being human beings. And so I think I love the way you broke down traveling by air to London versus taking the train, the high-speed train, because that's how I look at travel. I add up all the time to the airport, time at the airport, the flight, time from the airport to wherever I'm going, and compare options for travel. And I went to a conference in May in Malvern, Pennsylvania, and it was a 2.5 hour drive versus what would have turned into 5.5 hours if I would have flown to Philadelphia, the train, and so to your point, I'm using a plane, which is putting out fuel and carbon emissions, and then getting on a train and then probably taking a cab from the train station to where I was going. Whereas on the road, and this is something my husband mentions all the time when we're at a long stoplight, they're just making us put more carbon in the air. They should just let us go more often. And we're wasting fuel that's precious. So I think looking at the world that way is really great. Oh my goodness. Wow. This conversation has been so deep and covered so many topics. I didn't realize how long we'd been talking. So I'm afraid it's time to wrap up our episode for this week. Joost, it's been such a pleasure having you back and hearing your perspectives. And you've been a guest before, so I like to ask my guests, what is the one thought you would like the audience to take away today? And how can they get in touch with you if they'd like to learn more about sustainability, especially in the airline industry?
Okay, tough questions, because there's a lot of things I want people to take on board to stay in airline terms. But the one thing I think is important is that we are all individual responsible for our footstep. And if you travel a lot, you may want to think like, okay, maybe I should eat a little bit less meat. If you eat a lot of meat, you may want to say like, okay, I may have to travel a bit less. It's about the balance. And you don't have to stop traveling, but you have to be responsible and sometimes say to yourself, is this really necessary what I'm doing now? Or is it just for fun? Act responsibly. And that goes for everybody. And that's not only for our planet or a sustainability discussion, that's for everything. So yeah, I'm committed to, like I said in the beginning, to work on this topic in the years to come, because as I said in the beginning, it's our only license to operate. If we don't decarbonize, we have no future as an aviation industry. Because we also know that, like we said, eventually our natural resources, they will stop at some day. I will continue to be committed. And if people want to chat with me about this topic, which is close to my heart, you can reach me via LinkedIn, or you can reach me via our website, www.barin.nl. And I'll be happy to start a conversation with any one of your listeners.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much, Joost. It's really been a pleasure having you back. I know I already said that, but it's been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Most
and
welcome.
I love, thank you. I love talking to people from outside the United States and getting the different perspectives, because I've traveled a little bit, and I wouldn't say I've seen the whole world, but I've seen a little bit of it, and seeing the different ways we live, we can all learn from each other. So it's been great.
Yeah. All right. Good luck
Great.
with the show.
Thank you so much. And it's time for us to go rogue. We'll be back next week with episode 200. If you've been following our countdown the last month or so, this is episode 199, believe it or not. So check us out next week for our 200th episode with our special guest host, Michael Butera of the Association Futures podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help your company or group bloom outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com. If you're looking for nonprofit management education, check out our education program, the 501c League. It has its own website, the 501cleague.net. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time.